All right, let's dive in. You've given us a pretty hefty reading list this time. Academic papers, articles, even a travel blog.
Mm,
And they all center on this connection between ancient Egypt, or Kemet, as we'll be calling it,
right.
and ancient Greek philosophy.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating area.
It is. So our mission is to dig into this link and see if there's solid evidence to support the idea that Greek philosophical thought
Okay.
wasn't entirely homegrown, but was actually influenced significantly by Kemetic knowledge.
It's a question that has been debated for centuries among scholars. And, it all begins with really understanding just how intellectually advanced Kemet truly was.
Yeah, one of the academic papers we have paints a picture of Kemet that goes way beyond just pyramids and pharaohs.
Right.
It really emphasizes this idea of a society that was a true intellectual powerhouse.
Exactly. I think there's a tendency to kind of get caught up in the monumental aspects of ancient Egypt.
Yeah.
But Kemet was a center of learning that, really rivaled any modern university. And their understanding of astronomy, for example, was so advanced that it formed the basis of our modern calendar.
That's incredible.
Think about that.
Hmm.
We're still using knowledge that has been passed down
Right.
from Kemet.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what else they knew
Oh, absolutely.
that has been lost to time.
Yeah.
The paper also talks about the role of the Kemetic priesthood, who were not just religious figures, but also astronomers, mathematicians, and the keepers of a really complex philosophical system.
Absolutely. And at the heart of that system was this concept of ma'at,
Okay.
which is often simplified as just meaning truth.
Right.
But it's so much more than that. Ma'at represents cosmic order, balance, justice. It was this fundamental principle that really permeated every aspect of
Oh, wow.
Kemetic society. If you can imagine a society where balance and harmony are kind of woven into the very fabric of life, that's the essence of Ma'at.
It's an incredibly rich concept.
Yeah.
So how did the Greeks, who were, developing their own philosophical ideas, how did they interact with this advanced civilization?
Yeah, and that's where things get even more interesting. For a long time, Greeks were actually barred from entering Kemetic universities.
What?
They were very eager to learn from the masters,
Okay.
but they were restricted.
Interesting. So some of them did manage to study in Kemet, though.
Oh, absolutely.
Hmm.
We're talking about some of the most prominent names in Greek philosophy: Thales, Pythagoras, Plato,
Wow.
even Aristotle, all believed to have spent time studying in Kemet.
It's like an intellectual pilgrimage almost.
Exactly. Imagine the kind of intellectual awakening they must have experienced
Yeah.
encountering this vast body of knowledge that had been developing for centuries.
It must have been mind-blowing.
Yeah.
One of the sources we have actually quotes Isocrates,
Oh, right.
a Greek writer who just flat out stated that the Egyptians had it all figured out.
Yeah.
He went so far as to say that Pythagoras brought back all of philosophy from his time in Egypt.
Now, whether Socrates meant that literally or was using a bit of hyperbole is debatable. But what's crucial is that acknowledging Kemet's influence wasn't some fringe idea back then.
Right.
It was a widely accepted fact.
Yeah. So if this connection was so well known back then, how did the narrative shift? Why do we think of Greek philosophy as like the sole origin
Right.
of Western thought?
Yeah, this is where we enter a more controversial area.
Okay.
One of the academic papers introduces us to the work of Martin Bernal.
Okay.
And Bernal was a scholar who put forward this very bold theory that the idea of Greece as the sole source of Western thought
Wow.
was actually a deliberate rewriting of history
Right.
that began around the 19th century.
The deliberate rewriting of history. Why would somebody do that?
Well, Bernal's theory suggests, and it's still debated today, but his theory suggests it was a convergence of factors.
Yeah.
19th century racism, the rise of Romanticism,
Oh.
this movement that idealized the past, and a desire among Europeans to create this narrative of
Yeah.
pure, uninfluenced genius.
So basically a movement to kind of erase the contributions of a non-European civilization from the story of Western thought.
It's a simplified way of putting it, but it does capture the essence of the argument. And while many scholars today still reject this idea of Kemetic influence, it's a debate that raises some really important questions about how we interpret history and whose voices get heard.
It's unsettling to think about how historical narratives can be manipulated like that. It makes you wonder what other truths might be hidden.
Yeah.
But before we get too lost in the big picture, let's maybe zoom in on some specifics. We keep mentioning these Greek philosophers who studied in Kemet. What exactly were they learning? Can we see traces of Kemetic influence in their own philosophies?
Well, let's start with Thales, often hailed as the father of Western philosophy.
Okay.
Several sources suggest that he traveled to Kemet and actually spent time with the Kemetic priests, studying astronomy, geometry, and even engineering.
That's incredible. The very person who's credited with kicking off Western philosophy
Right.
was potentially drawing from Egyptian knowledge.
It's amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
What specific aspects of Thales' thinking might have been influenced by his time in Kemet?
It's difficult to draw direct lines, but it's fascinating to consider what Thales was known for.
Yeah.
He's credited with predicting a solar eclipse, which points to his astronomical knowledge, a field where the Egyptians excel.
Right.
And he also emphasized this idea that water was the fundamental principle of the universe. Now, this isn't a direct copy of Kemetic beliefs,
Right.
but it does raise questions about how observing the Nile's life-giving role in Egyptian society might have sparked his thinking.
Like seeing a seed of an idea planted in one civilization
Exactly.
and then blossoming in another.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't just Thales, right? Didn't Pythagoras also spend a considerable amount of time in Kemet?
Absolutely. Pythagoras, famous for his mathematical theorem, is believed to have studied in Kemet for over 2 decades.
20 years.
20 years. That's a serious commitment to learning.
Wow.
And as we mentioned earlier, Isocrates, that Greek writer, claimed that Pythagoras brought back all of philosophy from Egypt.
Right.
Now, again, whether that's literal or an exaggeration, it points to a profound connection.
Even if we take Isocrates' statement with a grain of salt, it still suggests a deep level of engagement with Kemetic thought.
Mm-hmm.
And this leads us to another giant of Greek philosophy,
Yes.
Plato. There's evidence he also spent time in Kemet.
Yeah, Plato is believed to have studied in Kemet as well, focusing on geometry and theology.
Mm-hmm.
What's particularly interesting is that some scholars see a potential connection between Plato's concept of the philosopher king and the role of the Kemetic priesthood in Egyptian society. The priests held significant authority, not just religious, but also political and intellectual.
So we're seeing this potential link between the Kemetic idea of a wise ruling class and Plato's vision of an ideal society, led by philosopher kings.
It's a fascinating parallel.
It makes you wonder how much of what we consider like classical Greek philosophy was actually inspired by earlier Kemetic ideas.
That's the million-dollar question. And it's not just about specific concepts like the philosopher king, remember Mott, the Kemetic principle of cosmic order and balance? Well, this idea resonates with many Greek philosophical concepts, like Plato's idea of the forms, which represent perfect and eternal ideals that exist beyond the physical world.
It's like the Greeks took this core concept of order and harmony that was central to Kemetic thought, and then reinterpreted it through their own philosophical lens.
Yeah, and if we consider the historical context, it makes sense. The Greeks held Egyptian civilization in high regard.
Right.
They viewed them as this source of wisdom and knowledge.
Yeah.
So it's only natural that some of that wisdom would kind of seep into their own philosophical systems.
It paints a very different picture of the relationship between ancient Greece and ancient Egypt
It does.
than what's traditionally presented. But I know there are scholars who kind of push back on this whole idea of Kemetic influence.
Right.
What are their main arguments?
Their arguments often revolve around the idea that even if Greek philosophers studied in Kemet, it doesn't automatically mean that they just adopted Kemetic ideas wholesale. They argue that Greek philosophy ultimately developed its own distinct character and addressed different questions than Kemetic thought did. For example, the Greeks were particularly concerned with logic reason and the nature of the physical world, while Kemetic philosophy was very deeply intertwined with religion and the concept of ma'at.
So it's more about recognizing Greek philosophy as a separate and independent development, even if it was potentially sparked by earlier encounters with Kemetic thought.
Exactly. They acknowledge the possibility of some level of influence, but they argue that Greek thought should be understood on its own terms.
It sounds like this debate is less about denying any influence and more about figuring out the degree and the nature of that influence.
Precisely. And it's a debate worth having because it forces us to think critically about historical narratives.
Absolutely.
And how knowledge is transmitted across cultures. It also reminds us that history is rarely a simple linear story.
Yeah.
It's more like a tapestry woven from multiple threads, each contributing to the richness and complexity of the whole.
And in this case, one of those threads leads back to Kemet,
Yeah.
a civilization that clearly had a profound impact on the ancient world. even if that impact hasn't always been fully acknowledged.
And that brings us to an important question. How do we reconcile these different perspectives? How do we navigate this complex historical landscape
Yeah.
and come to our own understanding of the relationship between Kemet and ancient Greek thought?
It feels like we've been on this incredible journey through time,
Yeah,
tracing these intellectual currents that flowed from Kemet to ancient Greece.
it is.
It's really shifted my perspective on the origins of Western thought.
Yeah, it's a journey that challenges us to, question assumptions and delve deeper into the interconnectedness of human history.
Hmm.
And what's really fascinating is that Kemet's influence wasn't limited to just Greece. One of the sources, a travel blog we had, highlights how ancient Egyptian culture and religion left a lasting mark on civilizations
Oh, yeah.
far beyond the Mediterranean.
The blog specifically mentioned the influence of Kemetic religious ideas on early Christianity
Exactly.
and even connections to ancient Indian beliefs.
It's a reminder that civilizations weren't these isolated entities.
Right.
There was this constant exchange of knowledge, beliefs, and practices happening across vast distances and over long periods.
Yeah.
And Kemet, with its sophisticated culture and its enduring legacy, played a significant role.
It did. It makes you realize how much richer and more complex the story of human civilization is than what's often presented in textbooks.
Absolutely.
But we also have to acknowledge that recognizing Kemet's influence hasn't always been easy.
Right. As we discussed, there have been attempts to downplay or even erase Kemet's contributions to the development of Western thought.
Yeah.
But in recent decades, there's been this growing movement to kind of reclaim and reinterpret Kemet's legacy.
And that's where the use of the term Kemet itself becomes so important.
Exactly.
It's more than just a different name.
It's like a conscious decision to acknowledge the indigenous African roots of
Absolutely.
the civilization.
Choosing to use Kemet instead of Egypt is a powerful act of reclaiming agency and kind of shifting the lens through which we view history. It's about recognizing the contributions of African civilizations to the broader story of human knowledge and culture.
And what's so exciting is that this shift in perspective isn't just about the past.
Right.
It's also about finding inspiration in this ancient wisdom for the challenges we face today.
Absolutely.
The travel blog even mentioned the concept of math as a potential framework
Oh, yeah.
for building a more just and balanced society.
That's a brilliant point. Meta, with its emphasis on harmony, justice, and reciprocity, offers this really powerful set of principles that resonate deeply with contemporary concerns about social justice, environmental sustainability, and ethical living.
Right.
It's a testament to the enduring relevance of ancient wisdom.
It's like these ancient ideas are waiting to be rediscovered and applied to the complexities of the modern world.
Exactly.
It makes me wonder what other hidden gems of knowledge might be waiting for us to uncover.
That's the beauty of exploration and discovery. The journey never truly ends. This deep dive has just scratched the surface of a vast and fascinating subject. It's up to each of us to keep digging, to keep questioning, and to keep seeking out those hidden connections that link us to the past and kind of illuminate the path forward.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
This deep dive has been a mind-opening experience, and I want to thank you for guiding us
Oh, the pleasure was all mine.
through these complex ideas with such clarity and insight.
And remember, the most important part of any deep dive is what you, the listener, take away from it.
Yeah.
We've provided the tools, the information, the different perspectives, but it's up to you to continue the exploration.
Right.
Keep asking questions, keep challenging assumptions, and keep that spirit of discovery alive.
So what does it all mean?
Well, it means that the story of human knowledge is far more intricate and interconnected than we often realize. And it means that the legacy of Kemet, this ancient civilization that reached for the stars and sought to understand the mysteries of the universe, is still very much alive, waiting to be explored, reinterpreted, and perhaps even rediscovered by each new generation.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep exploring that remarkable tapestry of human history. Feels like we've been on this incredible journey through time, tracing these intellectual currents that flowed from Kemet to ancient Greece.
It has been quite a journey.
And I have to say, it's really shifted my perspective on the origins of Western thought.
It's a journey that really challenges us to question assumptions and delve deeper into the interconnectedness of human history.
It does.
And what's fascinating is that Kemet's influence wasn't limited to just Greece.
Right.
One of the sources, a travel blog we had, highlights how ancient Egyptian culture and religion left a lasting mark on civilizations far beyond the Mediterranean.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
The blog specifically mentioned the influence of Kemetic religious ideas on early Christianity,
Exactly.
and even connections to ancient Indian beliefs.
It's a reminder that civilizations weren't these isolated entities.
Right.
There was this constant exchange of knowledge, beliefs, and practices happening across vast distances and over long periods.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And Kemet, with its sophisticated culture and its enduring legacy, played a significant role in that exchange.
It makes you realize how much richer and more complex the story of human civilization is than what's often presented in textbooks.
Absolutely.
But we also have to acknowledge that recognizing Kemet's influence hasn't always been easy.
You're right. As we discussed, there have been attempts to downplay or even erase Kemet's contributions to the development of Western thought.
Yeah.
But in recent decades, there's been this growing movement to reclaim and reinterpret Kemet's legacy.
And that's where the use of the term Kemet itself becomes so important, right?
Exactly.
It's more than just a different name. It's a conscious decision to acknowledge the indigenous African roots of this civilization.
Absolutely. Choosing to use Kemet instead of Egypt is a powerful act of reclaiming agency and shifting the lens through which we view history.
Right.
It's about recognizing the contributions of African civilizations to the broader story of human knowledge and culture.
And what's so exciting is that this shift in perspective isn't just about the past. It's also about finding inspiration in this ancient wisdom
Right.
for the challenges we face today. The travel blog even mentioned the concept of Mott as a potential framework
Oh, yeah.
for building a more just and balanced society.
That's a brilliant point. Mott, with its emphasis on harmony, justice, and reciprocity, offers a powerful set of principles
Yeah.
that resonate deeply with contemporary concerns about social justice, environmental sustainability, and ethical living.
It does feel very relevant.
It's a testament to the enduring relevance of ancient wisdom.
It's like these ancient ideas are waiting to be rediscovered and applied to the complexities of the modern world. Makes me wonder what other hidden gems of knowledge might be waiting for us to uncover.
That's the beauty of exploration and discovery. The journey never truly ends. This deep dive has just scratched the surface of a vast and fascinating subject.
It really has.
It's up to each of us to keep digging, to keep questioning, and to keep seeking out those hidden connections that link us to the past and illuminate the path forward.
I couldn't have said it better myself. This deep dive has been a mind-opening experience, and I want to thank you for guiding us through these complex ideas with such clarity and insight.
Oh, the pleasure was all mine. And remember, the most important part of any deep dive is what you, the listener, take away from it.
That's right.
We've provided the tools, the information, the different perspectives, but it's up to you to continue the exploration. Keep asking questions, keep challenging assumptions, and keep that spirit of discovery alive.
So what does it all mean?
Well, it means that the story of human knowledge is far more intricate and interconnected than we often realize. And it means that the legacy of Kemet, this ancient civilization that reached for the stars and sought to understand the mysteries of the universe, is still very much alive, waiting to be explored, reinterpreted, and perhaps even rediscovered by each new generation.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep exploring that remarkable tapestry of human history.